Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining for this first MERLIN webinar. I'm seeing there are already 25 people waiting, so I think we can start, and I expect more people to join. Thank you very much for being here. We'll have a 1-hour webinar with 45 minutes presentation and 15 minutes of questions and answering. So the topic of today's webinar is how to help today's researchers create tomorrow's enterprises. That's a big topic, but more specifically, our topic will be on how to get access to finance for helping companies grow. So a bit about the project. Our project MERLIN is aiming in helping ICT researchers in Europe in starting a business, to spin off, to patent, to license, in short, how to commercialize their research results. So there will be benefits, and it's not just the research results. We do this through an international consortium funded by the European Union under Horizon 2020, under the Startup Europe scheme. We do this practically in 4 different types of activities. We organize in different European cities practical thematic workshops for ICT researchers on how to set up a business, how to find your market, how to find customers, how to develop a business model, how to make a business plan. We participate in existing international conferences on the topic of ICT with dedicated workshops helping ICT researchers how to be more entrepreneurial. We will organize 4 different webinars, and this webinar is the first of a series of 4 webinars on how to grow your business and also how to develop business models for private-public partnerships. And practically, we will be organizing 8 meetups between ICT researchers and businesses to initiate collaboration for how ICT researchers can help and how their research results can help existing businesses to get commercialized and can be applied. You can find more information about this project on the hyperlink you see down. There's a very nice video I would recommend you to view, and also our website. The link is here indicated. Today's webinar has specific learning objectives, 2 different objectives. We want to help you understand what are the advantages and also the disadvantages of different types of funding, especially public funding. There are advantages, there are disadvantages. It doesn't mean that public funding only has benefits, it also has disadvantages, and it's good to navigate through the different types of funding that are available and make a good choice which type of grant suits your business. So we want to help you to understand what are the appropriate sources of finance to help your business to grow. We have some guidelines. So there is the possibility to ask questions. You have a chat functions in this webinar. You can type your question. At the end of this webinar, after 45 minutes, there will be 15 minutes question and answering, where I will take a look at pick questions and try to provide you with an answer. It depends on the number of questions that will be raised. Also, for your information, we'll record the whole session, and after later on we'll upload to our MERLIN website the full recording of this webinar, so it will be available for anybody, for you or for your friends or colleagues to view and watch in its entirety later on. We'll also make the slides from this webinar publicly available, so if you don't want to view the whole webinar, you can just have access to the slides. So, what will we discuss in this webinar? We'll have different topics. We'll go one by one through the different topics. We'll introduce first a basic understanding, what is the financing landscape? How is financing, what are the sources of finance available in the different stages of the growth of a company? Then I'll focus more on the introduction of European Union grants. What grants are there available? and specific focus on 3 different funding schemes available in the European Union, focusing on SMEs and helping them grow. I'll introduce them one by one. I'll say something on the European structural and investment funds, and give some advice and tips on how to write a proposal for these grants. And in the end, there will be the possibilities to ask questions, and I'll try to pick some questions and try to give some answers to you. So feel free to already write questions if you have. I would recommend you to, if you have a question that's specifically for a slide, write a slide number next to your question. Then it's easier for me to go back to that slide and then provide you with an answer. So, welcome. Let's start. First, some words about me. I don't want to keep it too long to bother you, but my name is Sander van der Molen. I work in Civita in Lithuania, management consultancy company. My background is in innovation. I've been working in public, in research, and now in private industry, helping individual companies to innovate, to commercialize, to develop their innovative solutions. I've been mentoring companies, coaching companies, startup teams in how to commercialize, develop, and grow their companies. My areas of expertise are innovation policy, digitalization, business modeling, foresight, technological transfer. And I've been working with companies, startups, large companies, research institutions, public authorities in different countries, especially in Europe. Enough about me. Let's go through to the next topic of the funding. So the funding landscape. Some of you might have seen this picture before. It's a quite standard picture to provide insights in how the different types of funding are available dependent on the growth stage of a company. And it's mapping actually different things. It's mapping, if you see the dotted line of risk that starts in the early stages being high risk and after growth decreasing the risk. What it means is when you start a new company, your risks are the highest. Highest likelihood that you might not succeed is in the beginning. When you have not yet ready products or service, you don't have customers yet, you have not proven to the market you exist, you don't have a reputation, you don't have revenues, but you do have cost because you want to develop something, you're investing your time and sometimes financial resources to start a company. So this is the highest risk available in the beginning, and that's why it might be very difficult to attract funding from private sources for a bank, for example, to help you in the early stages. But the further you continue in your development, the more customers you get, the more you scale your company, you prove your business model, you prove that to customers that you provide real value, you're trustworthy, your product or your service provides added value, the lower risk of failure there is, and the more eager private companies like banks will be to invest in you. So this is a bit of the paradox because you still need funding also at the beginning of your growth stage, but you cannot prove your success because a lot of possible finance sources will say you're too risky to invest. So what we see in this picture is the different type of funding schemes and investors, the funding sources you can use in the different stages of your company. When you start at the very beginning, the so-called pre-seed, meaning you don't even have a legal entity, you actually just have an idea, you might have a couple of people, friends you want to start your company together, but you have not much yet. You have an idea, maybe you have some research results if you're in a university, and you might have a patent or you might not have a patent, but you're very early stage. At that stage, actually, it's often family, friends are the only ones that would be willing to lend you some money, to invest some money in you, to give it just for free because they know you, and actually they trust you because they know you, and they are willing to invest because they're not investing in the company, but they just give you the money because they trust you and they think, well, you're a competent person and we trust that you can make it happen. If you go to any stranger, that stranger does not know you and you have nothing to show at the early stage, so it's very difficult to get any funding outside your friends and family, the people that know and trust you. However, that will change as soon as you establish a company and get a real business plan, get maybe a first customer or a proof of concept or a prototype of the product or service you want to sell, and you can demonstrate and show to a so-called business angel, an individual with some spare money that is investing in very early stage startups, often taking a share of the equity of that new startup and willing to help and fund and support and coach you to grow bigger. Nowadays, through Kickstarter or Indiegogo, there are also crowdfunding campaigns where online you can raise money from early, not investors, but I would say customers that want to sign up for your products or your service before you even have made it. You just demonstrate the idea and the timeline when you expect and the price tag that you want to give to your product or service. Then people can sign up for that product, already pay in advance, and then they have to wait till you can manufacture or produce the product or service. Crowdfunding is very popular for consumer goods, for especially products that you can manufacture. It's very helpful to raise some funding. However, the funding should be used for the making of the product to provide it to the customers, and that's why it doesn't help you for your company development, for your investments, because you need money for making the product. So often in practice you see that companies at this early stage will use a portfolio of different funding sources. After business angels, you can have seed funding, and what you can see is that the amount of money you need to grow your company will increase. Hopefully you will get less risky, but at this early growth stage, when you have some business angel funding or some seed funding, the only available funding you can attract to grow before you can go to a bank and really get a bank loan is venture capital funding. And this means that's what is often called the valley of death. It's making that stage from having a first couple of clients but growing to a big scale up, a scaling company with sustained business and very low risk, being self-sustainable for your business operations and needing additional funding only for growing your company. You are quite dependent on the availability of venture capital funds, and it might be quite risky therefore to make that huge step from early stage starting till having a sustained business, being mature. Now, the topic of this webinar will focus mainly on the grants. Grants are publicly available money that can help cover your early stage growth of your company by providing funding for different kind of activities. It can be research and development, it can be commercialization, it can be business, early business market research, or business growth. And these grants do not have to substitute, but could substitute other types of funding, or they can be used complementary. However, to keep in mind, and what was not mentioned in the previous slide, the most important source of funding should always be clients. Clients are validating that you have an added value product or services. There is a market. Somebody is willing to pay money for the product or service you want to invest and you want to develop. Your clients are giving you funding by paying and buying your product or service, as well as validating that they value what you produce with more than the money they give you. So this is very important to always keep in mind, that clients are the ones that actually grow your business because they're buying your service and your product. And it's risky to lose track of the clients. If you look at the previous slides and all the sources of funding available, you might start trying to sell your attention and your services to family, friends, business angels, funds, venture capital, and try to upsell to the next investor without even looking at, are there customers interested in what I do? So always keep in mind, for whom am I developing my business? For your clients, your paying customers. However, to get to the paying customers, grants can provide help in funding to get ready to sell to clients. We should keep in mind that different companies have different funding requirements. Especially technology-based companies, they do require investment in the early stage for developing of hardware, of software, of technology, maybe the certification, the manufacturing of the technology. And this will require high investments in the early stage of the company. However, once you are up in the market and you're trying to scale, you can scale faster because technology is easier scalable than people. Meaning if you have 10 people and you have some websites with services and running on a local server, you can maybe have thousands, and maybe you can easily scale to 1 million customers, or even 10 million or 1 billion customers, like a Facebook, an Amazon, or Google is doing. However, if you have a company with just people that are providing consultancy services, you don't need to invest in the beginning, in the early stages that much. You don't need to have the equipment or infrastructure or developing a product or even certifying a product and hardware. However, the scaling is very difficult because the number of clients you can handle is dependent on the number of employees you have. So this means practically that it might be less risky to provide and set up a consultancy company. However, the downsides are that you will never able to scale that fast and that big if you compare it to a technology company. And you have to keep in mind, not all technology companies are the same. So there are companies that just sell a certain kind of small sensor or a small consumer device, or we can talk about technology companies like Facebook and Google that have huge servers or use type of infrastructure and equipment, or selling cars, or maybe even space shuttles to launch people to space. Not all of these companies are the same. They might have the same curve, high investments in the beginning, high upsides in revenues and profits later. But how long that takes till the profits is there depends per company and depends on where they're aiming for, how deep the depths are in the investments in the beginning. It depends on technology, the company, and their ambitions. So there are companies like Amazon that might take a decade before they start making profits. Companies like Netflix, these type of technology companies, they focus purely on getting more and more customers, and profits will come later. Investments go first and profits will come much later, and hopefully much more higher. So this to keep in mind why you need the different funding, especially if you're technology based. You need in the beginning funding, possibly grants to help fund that gap until you make profits. The essentials of financing to keep in mind, especially for public finance. You won't get money just because you need it. You have to keep in mind the perspective of the organization that provides you with funding. If you talk about the grants, there's a public agency that wants to provide you with funding. It's not because you need funding that they will give it to you. It's because they see a benefit to give you that money, and it aligns to their goals and to their overall purposes. You don't get the amount of money you need, you get the money that's available in that specific grant. You have to keep in mind you have to be funding ready. And funding ready means you have to be at the right stage for that specific grant that you want to apply for. And that means technological, business-wise, geographical, having a legal entity or not. You cannot just apply because you need it. You have to be as ready as you are. This is both the case for public grants as well as for private investors. They will not only invest in the idea, it's a good idea or not. No, you have to be ready, have your assumptions underpinning your business plan validated. You have to be ready with the prototype. You have to be ready on your organization before an investor will invest in you. Your finance or financial projections must look good. Those are two different things, and it depends on the public agency providing you a grant. For some public grants, there might be national regulations stating that if you have debts to any public agency, you're not allowed to get the grant. So this means your existing outstanding debts as a legal entity. But also your financial projections means you have to demonstrate that if you ask for a grant, that you can actually grow your company and it's worthwhile for the public agency to invest in your company because you are able to generate benefits, and benefits can also be measured in finance. Does it make sense? Will you make a profit, and is the amount of this profit high enough to justify the size of the public investment? So if you're going to ask for 1 million euro grants and then you'll say I'll make 10,000 euro profits for the next 10 years, that would not justify your 1 million euro grants. Also, you have to take a look at the right source at the right time with the right story. This means you have to pick the source of funding, pick it when you are ready and when that grant is available. Not all grants are available all of the time. It means grants launch calls. We say, please, there have a specific timeline where you can apply for a grant. And at that time, you have to be ready. So you have to be ready with the right story. We are this and this company. We are developing this and this solution for this and this problem and earn money, but we need public funding for doing these type of activities. To keep in mind, just asking money because we need 2 months of operational costs to bridge before we're ready is not a justification. That means you are centered on you, what you need. It's the other way around. You have to think what public agency provides funding for what rationale, and this rationale is always published in that call, identifying why the public agency thought it necessary to provide grants available. You have to read those calls and understand and tell the right story, why you are the right organization, the right company at the right time, ready, and you can make best use of that grant. So let's focus on grants, especially in the European Union. What are business grants for? So as I said, it's not just for operational business operating costs. Grants are mainly available in Europe for doing technology, research and development, not basic scientific research. This is research and development for developing your products or process or service, making it market ready. The grants could be available for product commercialization. So you have a prototype, but you want to make it into a final product and you want to start selling it in the right market for the right price, at the right position in the value chain, under the right conditions. It could be supporting social enterprises. So these are either non-profit or for-profit enterprises with a social aim. It could be an environmental aim or social aim, having benefits beyond the profits, benefiting social disadvantaged groups, specific minority groups, or there is a social benefits. Or it could be even an environmental benefits that you as a corporation or organization provide to. So environmental issues, there are grants available for public agencies or for NGOs or research organizations. Our focus on this webinar is on business grants. So business grants could also be available for companies that provide solutions that will benefit the environment. And there might be specific grants available for assisted areas. That means areas in the European Union that are less developed and needs structural assistance through funding investment funds in infrastructure, knowledge, and innovation. You can see in the map the dark colored areas, especially the areas that get most assistance. The good things and the bad things. The good and the bad things about grant funding. So some of the good things, obviously, number one, the cash, meaning the money you can get. Grants means you can provide and attract some funding, helping your company in developing, especially at the early stages when your options for funding are quite limited. The second good thing for grants is you don't need to repay. It's not a bank loan. It's not at the end of the project that you have to repay. Grants are a one-time funding you receive. It might be at the beginning of the project, it might be at the end of the project, it might be both. But the idea is you don't need to pay back, so you can really use the money to invest. You don't have to give out equity, you don't have to give shares in the company. There's no ownership that you have to give back to the public agency, so this is an advantage over angel investors or venture capital. The fourth advantage, actually you might persuade equity investors to invest in your company because you already got a grant. So there are actually two side benefits. You can use a grant to postpone equity investment, say, no, dear angel investor, I don't want your money yet. I received a public grant, I can survive for another period, invest and develop my company further. And later on, you can go to an angel investor and say, now I'm ready to accept your money because now I have validated my products, my customers, my business model. I am more investment ready, and actually by that time you can maybe raise more funding or give away less of your equity, because at each stage of the company development stage, the further you are, the more money you can raise with less equity to give away, less share of your company you have to give away, and that has to do with the risk. So as I showed that in the beginning of your company development, the risks are highest, and the more you mature and develop, the risk decreases. Another positive thing that could emerge from grant funding is that a lot of these grants require collaboration, require collaborative projects with partners. And this might be a limitation for you. Why should I collaborate? But often this limitation turns out to be a benefit, that once you're required to do something in a partnership, you realize actually this partnership is very beneficial. And you can invite other organizations that would not automatically partner up with you, but convince them because there's a grant available for both of you. It could be an incentivation to invite partners to collaborate with you, and this collaboration could continue after the end of the project. So these are the 5 good benefits. Maybe there are even more benefits, but they are the positive things regarding grant funding. However, there are also not so good things. There are disadvantages of public funding. I'll put my headphone in, so hopefully you can hear me better. The disadvantages of grant funding. The funding might not suit your business. So actually, maybe you're not eligible, or the funding is for deep technology and you're making a website. So it means it's not available for you. The right grant funding is not for you. It might be time and effort intensive to run the grant funding projects. This means you have to spend time in applying for the grants. Then there is a risk that you will not get funded, and for the different schemes, the risk might be higher. And then once, in case you are being granted the funding, then you often have specific obligations for reporting, administration, that might cost you additional time. And in case of any startup or any company in the early stage of development, time is precious. The time you spend on reporting, you cannot spend on trying to sell or develop your product. So this is what we call the cost of public funding, of grants. There is a kind of share of the cost of grant funding that you have to spend on application, contracting, administration, reporting, accounting, that is on top of your normal business operations. Also, the availability for very early stage projects might be limited. A lot of the grant funding is available for legal entities. You have to have a legal entity. So if you're in the very early stage, just the idea phase, it might be very difficult to get a grant. Well, actually that stage is where you might need most additional funding, first funding, to actually launch your company or launch your product, to start your company. Strict rules. So strict rules are the rules that limit your way how you can spend your money. There might be rules on what is eligible cost. You can spend it on salaries, yes or no. You can spend it on equipment, on subcontracting, on technological development, on buying consumables. And these rules might limit your business development. When can you start using the grant? Is that at the time you're informed, at the time that you have a contract, or all these limitations you have to adapt and you have to take into account. It will limit your flexibility of what you can do with the funding. Late cost reimbursement. So there are different grants that say we can provide the grants, but only at the end of the project if you can prove to us you have spent the money. So this means that you will get the grant, but actually you only get it after you have spent the money and you get it reimbursed. So it's good to get a grant, but it doesn't solve your so-called liquidity problem, meaning that if you don't have any cash in your bank account, it's good to get a grant project, but you have to find a way how to get the liquidity, how to get money to run the project, spend the money, and show that you have spent the money for the public agency in order for them to reimburse your cost. So it might not solve your problem. If you're out of cash, a grant, some of the grant schemes won't give you cash only at the end of the project. And the last one here I want to highlight is the match funding. So this means the availability of the share of funding you have to bring yourself, because some of the grants will say we can finance 40, 50 or 60% of all the costs, and you have to bring the other co-financing yourself. So again, it solves only partially your problem how to fund your activities, because you have to find matching funding from your own pocket or from investors or from any other source. How to approach grant funding? There are two different approaches. And the first approach is actually the most popular, but it's I would call the wrong way. The most popular one is, I've heard there's a grant available. I've seen this specific publication of a grant funding. What do I need to do to get it? I see money, let's get the money. This is the wrong approach, because it means that you'll try to do everything and present yourself anyway to get the money that seems to be available, even if it's not intended to be for you. The right way is the other way around. You know what you want, how to do it, where you are in the development of your company. Are you established already? Are you having a legal entity? Do you have a prototype? You know where you are, you know where you need to go. You know what the next steps are, and then you'll look around. Is there anywhere a scheme that aligns very well with your plans? That means that scheme is made for you. It also means that if you can't find a scheme, you'll do anything that needs to be done to implement your plans. In the first way, you'll just try to do and promise something to do to get the grant that's available. And if you won't get the grant, you won't do those activities. The second, the right way, you know exactly what you want to do. You'll try to apply for a scheme if you find a suitable scheme. But in case you won't get the funding or you won't find the scheme, you'll anyway try to implement that scheme, because actually you need to develop your company. You need to do these plans no matter what, if you get a grant or not. And if you can't get a grant, you'll try to find other ways to get finance, or you will do it in a smaller scale, but you still do it. The companies that know why they're going to do what for the next steps, they are far better positioned to convince public agency why they need the money, what they're going to do with it, and that's why they're more likely to win. European grant funding. So the European Innovation Council, a new concept, a new pilot by the European Union trying to stimulate innovation in the European Union. They want to support top-class innovators, so meaning not just any innovator, but the top-class European best innovators, entrepreneurs, small companies and scientists with bright ideas and ambition to scale up internationally. So this means that different European funding schemes that are available for legal entities and SMEs all over Europe, often the European Union, but sometimes also for companies outside the European Union, they are competing because the European Innovation Council, through these different schemes that I'll present, are searching for the top class innovators, not just any innovator. So they'll try to select and fund through grant funding what they consider the best innovators, entrepreneurs, small companies and scientists with the brightest ideas and the ambition to scale up. So bright ideas, not just bright in itself, but the potential to commercialize and scale internationally. I want in this webinar to introduce 3 different funding schemes for SMEs for developing the growth of the company. The first is SME Instrument, the second is EUROSTARS, and the third one is Fast Track to Innovation. These 3 schemes are different, but they all combine that they're very well suited for early stage startups or existing SMEs with a new innovation with the ability to commercialize and scale and grow the company. So they're for SMEs with the interest, ability, ambition, potential to grow, independent on how old the company is. There are many more funding schemes available that I won't introduce here. There are some mentioned on this slide, and these funding schemes are for different activities, more for environmental projects, or they're more for average SMEs, or for researchers or mobility actions, or combination of companies and researchers doing more research-focused projects. There are many regional, national schemes that are country dependent, funded by either the EU or the national funding. I won't address these, so I will not provide a full scope of all projects and all grant opportunities. I want to focus on 3 that are relevant for innovative companies, startups and SMEs that have the ability and potential to grow. Let's start with the SME Instrument. The SME Instrument is for small and medium-sized enterprises with a high potential to grow. It's a scheme where individual companies, individual SME can apply. They don't need to partner up. They don't need to have a consortium of different organizations, and they can apply with their own idea. So it's a very bottom-up scheme, meaning that you come with your idea for commercialization, with your innovation, and you can apply. There are 3 different phases in this SME Instrument. In a first phase, you can get 50,000 euros for doing a 6-month project where you develop a feasibility and develop a business plan to check, is my innovative idea or prototype viable for the market? Can I grow a company based on that? The second phase is a much higher grant for up to 2.5 million euro. Here you have to provide co-finance of 30%. And the project is 1 till 2 years for demonstrating, testing, piloting, and scaling. So bring a product or service to the market and scale it. Then there's a third phase, and here you can't get a grant. You can get support services for trade shows, fairs, access to large companies, corporates, investors, sharing, knowledge sharing, to help and assist companies that gotten a grant either or and phase 1 or phase 2. So any company that got a phase 1 grant or a phase 2 grant can get this support. So it's not necessarily phase 3 that comes after phase 1 and phase 2, but during or after any of the phase 1 or phase 2 projects, you can get additional support services, but not a specific grant. More specifically, I already said phase 1 is a 6 months project. It takes around 3 months between application and getting the first prepayment for the grants. You can get a lump sum of 50,000 euros split in 2 payments, a prepayment, and after 6 months you have to file a final report, and then you get the final payment. The activities are market studies, involve users, check your IP, your intellectual property. It's a so-called soft activities to check the viability of your innovative idea. Hopefully this idea is not just idea phase, but let's say a prototype, something that you have developed and that you want to explore how to bring to which market, for what business model, using what partners. And the result of this project is a real business innovation plan, recommendations for other innovation activities, private financing needs. So you identify what are your needs to further finance, and possibly the next steps for commercialization. Then the next phase, the second phase, this is a bigger scale of projects, 1 to 2 years, where it takes up to 6 months from project proposal till signing and starting your project and signing a contract. You can get between €500,000 and €2 million grants with 70% funding, meaning you have to co-finance 30% yourself. And here the activities are focused on the commercialization. So it means you have to demonstrate activities, test, prototype, piloting, bring to market, create market demand. And the result should be you should be ready for commercialization and scaling. Phase 3 I talked already about. This provides support for any beneficiary in phase 1 and phase 2. So I won't explore further. Tips for SME Instrument: read very careful. Make sure you prepare a high quality plan proposal where other people read the proposal before you submit, and get support from the so-called NCP, National Contact Points, for the SME Instrument for SMEs that can help you review and give you more guidance. EUROSTARS. EUROSTARS is a different scheme. Here you have to be from a EUROSTARS Eureka member country. Here, please follow this link to check which countries organizations are eligible. You have to have a project with at least 2 partners, with 2 organizations when you apply. The project is about close to market research and development. It's applied research, technological development. So the activities are not market research, are not IP. It's about research and development. It should be led by a research and development performing SME, so a company that has a history of doing R&D. They should have researchers employed, and the researchers should have done research in the past and continue to do that in the projects. And the funding schemes and the availability of funding and co-funding is country specific. So you have to follow the link, click and select your country to identify what are the eligible criteria for me. How much funding can I get? How much co-funding do I have to bring? What is my funding agency and what are their requirements? A typical project in EUROSTARS is between 3 and 4 partners, not just SMEs. You can include research institutions, you can include large companies. However, the lead partner should be a research performing SME. Typically, the partners are from 2 till 3 countries for 30 months projects, and the total budget, including co-finance, is around €1.4 million. The topics can be very varied. It can be ICT, it can be Internet of Things, it can be medical devices, it can be AI, it can be transport. There's no limitations on the industry or the technology involved. Fast track to innovation. This is the third scheme that I still want to introduce. Fast track to innovation is for groundbreaking technologies, concepts, and business models which are close to markets. It has some similarities to SME Instrument, especially phase 2, because it's about bringing to market some innovative concepts, technology, or business model. However, the difference here is that you should be in a consortium to apply, a consortium of 3 till 5 different legal entities. Out of these 3 till 5 legal entities, 2 or 3 should be at least an industrial partner, so should be a company. Doesn't have to be an SME, it can be a large company, but you cannot apply with universities alone. You should have at least 2 or minimum 2 or 3 commercial companies, industry partners, and then they can partner up with a research organization, with the university, if there's an added value. What can you do? You can try to demonstrate that your innovative product and make it ready for market uptake through piloting, creating test beds, system validation, validating business model, developing or setting standards. It's focused for not niche products, but more breakthrough technologies will set a new standard. Again, you can take a look at the link if to find more information about example projects that were funded, example criteria for eligibility, if you think this is relevant for you. And it might be relevant, especially if you are developing new technologies in a group. If you're not individually developing technology, but you're working maybe also with the university, with the company, with a large company, and together you're developing and bringing different expertise together to make that breakthrough technology. You can get funding here up to 3 million euros, and it could be up to 3 months projects. So I have to speed up to leave time for questions. Here's a slide with the overview of different grants available. So we just developed and discussed a couple of them. There are more grants available, different private funding, and dependent on your growth stage, you can take a look what matches better. The EU structural and investment funds, I would really recommend you take at your local, national country or regional country. Take a look, what are the specific schemes designed for your country, for what activities can I get funding. It might be very useful to do that because your competition might be limited to the legal entities and companies in your country or region, and you don't have to compete at international level. However, each country has different rules, different grants, so I cannot elaborate on what is available in your country. Support programs in general, MERLIN projects, which is organizing this webinar, falls under Startup Europe. This is, please follow this link, Startup Europe Club. It's an initiative from the European Commission to connect and to make a one-stop shop for all startup in related players, investors, startups, accelerators, entrepreneurs, bring them together and connect them throughout Europe. Enterprise Europe network is a big network that provides business support services and partnering services throughout the whole EU. So there will be an Enterprise Europe network at your doorstep nearby. Please find the link. And we have a sister project, EUROSTARS, that is providing innovation support services for especially early stage companies. Different Startup Europe projects are running. Take a look if you want and find out more support services you can get. And final advice, if you find a specific grant you want to apply for, make sure you always read carefully the call text. What can get funding? Who is eligible? What can I do? Where can I invest my money in? And keep in mind, is it suitable for what I want? Don't try to adapt your company, your application to the grant. Try to find a grant that is suitable and relevant for you. So this was the webinar. Now I really would like to know if there are any questions that you have posed. You can still type questions in the chat. Please remind the reminder that if you have a question to a specific slide, hopefully you have written down the slide number, and I'll try to answer your question. Okay, we have a question coming on from Naglis. What grant could be used for technology transfer platform business idea? Very interesting question. Thank you for this question. I would say the answer depends very much on what you want to do. You have to keep in mind that technology transfer is itself an activity often done inside a university or a research institute, done for non-profit, and there are specific funds available, structural funds at the national level, but there are also funding at the international level to co-finance the operation or co-finance how to set up a technology transfer office. I see your question relates not just to the technology transfer office in a research institute or in a university, but for the platform business idea. So your idea is to create an online platform that would facilitate technology transfer. So if you would run this as a for-profit company, you're a startup, you want to commercialize your platform, develop it, help universities and companies to connect and facilitate this. Yeah, thanks for the clarification. If you want to facilitate this commercialization, if it's a for-profit company where actually you will price your service, helping to connect researchers and industry, you can use any of the schemes developed. If you need to develop the platform, you can use this EUROSTARS program to develop the platform, and you can do this in partnership with another company. If you think it's very innovative idea and nobody has done this in Europe, in the world, and you have big potential to grow and scale, you could apply to the SME Instrument. However, I would think and try to find some, let's say, Enterprise Europe network consultants in your country to consult with the business idea, because they can try to show you what other companies exist in Europe in this field with whom you could partner up. And my personal experience in this field, it's very difficult to make a profitable business in connecting researchers to industry. Quite some public funding is already available for researchers, for universities, for research institutes, to try to commercialize their research results, to put researchers in connection to industry. And the reason the public funding is available is because actually it's not so much profitable business. I would say lawyers make a good business in charging universities for their services in supporting, should you patent or not patent, on how to patent. There might be companies that provide services to universities or to the public sector, organizing research to industry business meetings, B2B matchmaking events. But most of these are publicly funded, also limiting the potential to make a real profit out of this. But maybe I'm wrong, and there is a profitable business to be made out of this. So please take a look at the grants available from national and international funding and identify, do you need the funding for the research and development, making the platform, or do you need specific grant funding for the commercialization, for developing your business plan, doing the market research, and making the platform market ready? I hope this answers your question. Are there any other questions? Please feel free to type a question if you have. I can wait 1 more minute. Feel free to connect to me personally, to connect through the MERLIN website if you have specific questions, if you want to know what other webinars and when the next webinars will be organized. If this was interesting to you, maybe other webinars will be interesting to you as well. We will have a webinar organized on the topic of SME growth, so not the early stage, but further growth webinars. Further growth finance opportunities, both public and especially private funding, could be quite relevant and interesting. We'll announce on our MERLIN website when that will take place exactly. And there will be other webinars, there will be specific workshops in different cities organized, and matchmaking events. So please take a look at our website for any other activities upcoming. And thank you for your participation. I hope it was interesting, and maybe see you next time online or offline in any of our activities. Goodbye.